Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the Chanakya Dialogues English. Today I have with me Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, who's had a long career in the diplomatic corps. He was Deputy NSA. He was also, he served in assignments in the United Nations. He was Chief of Staff when Mr. Ban Ki-moon was the head of the United Nations. He's been in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, I have, sir, your entire extensive biodata here, sir. China, Malaysia, Algeria. Difficult for me to remember all of it, sir, but thank you very much for joining us, sir, and thank you for giving us the time, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be on the show. And I think, though, as I had mentioned to you, I have not been very active on the circuit these days because I'm living a relatively quiet life, having been up in say, fairly active places during my diplomatic career, and subsequently when I was at the United Nations for almost 11 years. But now I think I watch these things sometimes with a sense of deja vu. But of course, things are changing. There's no question that things are changing in a major way. Certainly for India, the activity, the activism, the proactivism, as it were, of India's foreign policy has actually been particularly prominent. And I think one can say that today in the councils of the world, I think India actually counts for a great deal. And I think that is, yes.
So my first question to you is, we've had these unfortunate series of crises between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And when on 15th of August last year, when the Taliban stormed into Kabul, there was a sense of jubilation. And I could have understood if Imran Khan got it wrong, because after all, he's a politician. He was in that position of Prime Minister for the first time. Maybe he does not have that, that benefit of institutional memory or the benefit of experience for that matter. But even the Pakistan Foreign Office got it wrong. They actually thought, a lot of them, very senior people, diplomats, career diplomats, who thought that the Taliban coming to power in Kabul was actually a good thing. And this would help Afghanistan in the long run, vis-a-vis Kashmir, vis-a-vis the western borders, the Durand line, and everything would be good, and now they could focus on India now. Apparently what has happened is, this is what I hear from the Pakistan media, sir, that over 105 Pakistani soldiers have lost their lives. Not a day goes by when there is not an attack inside Pakistan or on the border. And, in spite of Pakistan blaming India's many consulates, so they say, that there were more than 24 consulates inside Afghanistan, and them helping these terrorists. This was the Pakistani claim. Now the consulates are no longer there. Still there are attacks going on. Why did they read the situation wrong, sir? Why did career diplomats in Pakistan get it wrong?
Let me say first of all that the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan has been a very checkered one, and it's a mix in some ways of a relationship which is very deep and very consistent, at the same time which is very unpredictable. Mainly because, I mean, particularly in this has been this case all through. I was ambassador in almost 30 years ago in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and I was present in 1992 April when the then ISI chief and in fact even Nawaz Sharif came with Mujahideen and others when the Mujahideen actually landed in Kabul after the ouster or the flight of President Najibullah into the UN compound. Now, at that time too, there was a great sense of hubris and a sense of triumphalism among the Pakistanis. They felt that now they've got it all. They've got they've got what they wanted, a kind of the strategic depth and things like that. But at that time too, we of course at that time had not left. I continued, and I was actually Dean of the Diplomatic Corps during the very tumultuous days of April to almost October, November of 1992. Now, then too, there was a sense that among the Pakistanis that their long support for the Mujahideen movement in Afghanistan would render them a lot more capable of being able to micromanage the Afghans. But the Afghans are not like that. They are basically people who will not really stand up to dictation by others. Of course, they value their friends and they will, in fact, be loyal. Loyalty is, in fact, one of the Pashtun traits, but at the same time, there's a huge sense of independence and unwillingness to be drawn by the nose. And that, in a sense, is what's happening today, too. I mean, the Pakistanis did very patiently wait side with the Taliban through the years of the Islamic Republic, and through a series of perhaps strategic errors. After the Doha Agreement, the Taliban were able to just come down like a ton of bricks onto the Islamic Republic and establish their emirate. This, at the same time, with the help of the ISI and with particularly the Haqqani group in taking control eventually, there was a sense perhaps that they would listen a lot and they would be guided by the Pakistani, but they will be guided in terms of Afghan national interests, not Pakistan national interests. And I think this was perhaps more a wish. I don't think that the Pakistanis made a mistake. They were probably fully aware of this, but they felt that they could push, and they tried to push through their sort of acolytes and through their agents. But the situation in Kabul today is one where I think the Taliban have to seriously reassess their traditional posture, positions, and see how they can get maximum amount of support from the international community. And I think this is one reason why they are probably now trying to show that they're their own masters. Now, I think that there is, however, we should not run away with the conclusion that the Pakistanis and the Taliban are now at daggers drawn. I don't think so. I think there is still a lot of commonality between them, and one has to inevitably, I think, one has to take into account the fact that this is not just Pakistan and the Afghan, the Taliban in the Islamic Emirate, but there is a third factor, and that is the factor of China. The Chinese are an important player now. They've, in a sense, set aside their so-called ideas of non-interference. They've evolved a new concept of what they call constructive intervention. And I think they are directly going to be involved with affairs in Afghanistan, with a view to working out their larger equities with regard to the region and the sub-region.
Sir, you mentioned about constructive intervention as far as the Chinese are concerned. And a large part of Pakistan's geostrategic importance has been that Pakistan, A, has a port and B, has a border with Afghanistan leading into Central Asia. That has been a large part of the Pakistani narrative, the geostrategic narrative, sir. Now, China shares a border through the Wakhan corridor with Afghanistan. And if the Chinese are directly in touch with the Afghanistan, how much leverage does that leave Pakistan with? Isn't it diminishing leverage, sir?
Let me tell you this, as far as I can see, the Chinese have, by and large, over the last almost from the time they initially had contact, of course, they had contact with the Taliban even around 2000, but when they came in serious contact with the Taliban over the last 5-6 years, they've been doing all of this continuously in close coordination with Pakistan. Between the army and the Chinese, between the Pak army and the Chinese, both military as well as the Foreign Office, they have been trying to work as far as possible in dealing with the Taliban to coordinate with the Pakistanis. And the Pakistanis have, in fact, always provided a kind of intercession, a kind of good offices. Now, this is not to say that there is no difference. There's no sort of gap between what the Chinese have on the one hand, and I see that there is basically a binary as regards the Chinese interests in Afghanistan and the Pakistani interest in Afghanistan. What do I mean by this binary? Pakistan has always been working with the Taliban in terms of the Islamic card. They've been using Islam as the main motivating force, because if they use nationalism as the motivating force in relations with the Taliban, then Pashtun nationalism becomes an important factor, and then things like that become a problem, and then it becomes difficult to manage the what may be called the kind of the boundary problem, Pashtunistan, between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Whereas they have actually, in a sense, downplayed the nationalistic element and talked about the larger Islamic element. Now, this larger Islamic element is what has given common cause to Pakistan and the Taliban in terms of Afghanistan and moving further into the broader, the broader Islamic, the kind of building the interests of Islam in the region. But that is again anathema to China. China would not want Afghanistan to develop to become a beacon of Islamism. It would, in fact, want the opposite. It would want to emphasize nationalism. It would want to emphasize developmental priorities and building Afghanistan as a kind of ideal a place for connectivity, the development of infrastructure and connectivity between Central Asia. And now that slowly they are trying to get Pakistan also to invest in that idea. And it looks like people like Kamar Bajwa and others, General Bajwa has been talking increasingly of geoeconomics and things like that when it comes to the larger relationship of the sub-region. But when you talk about that, it is still difficult for Pakistan to be able to gain control in Afghanistan through this kind of nationalistic sort of narrative. And that is the basic difference. And I feel that increasingly, despite the fact that the Taliban and particularly the Haqqani group has been strongly, right from the time of Jalaluddin Haqqani. I remember in 1992, I actually met with him and with Yunus Khalis and others when they had just come into Pakistan. Then too, and I think even now, there is a very strong religious kind of element to the Haqqani kind of larger worldview. But that has to change today. And I think the Taliban are slowly realizing it. I don't know what the exact internal dynamics in the government, the Taliban government today is, but they are increasingly realizing that national development, building up, looking out to modernization, economic development has to be the topmost priority today. And for that, they need China. And I think increasingly, therefore, they will not be able to be pushed around in terms of an Islamic agenda. And there I see the binary.
So you spoke about connectivity, you spoke about stability and trade as far as China is concerned. So you said that China may not be so interested in an Islamic Afghanistan, but a nationalistic Afghanistan, which is not what Pakistan wants. Now, my question is Iran, sir. This is one player, an important player that not many people in the global media are talking about because of so many sanctions, because of the nuclear deal that is sometimes stuck, sometimes not stuck. Now, Iran also has an active seaport. Iran has excellent infrastructure. It has oil, it has a border with Afghanistan, and it has a path or a road directly to Central Asia. Do you think tomorrow Iran could be an important player? Because let us say, and this is hypothetical, sir. This is I know you deal in real politics, and I know you deal in the real world scenario. But I'm just saying hypothetically, as a student of geopolitics, I'm asking you, sir. Tomorrow, if relations with Iran were to be, if not normalized, then less aggressive and less volatile than they are today, do you think Iran could provide an alternate route for the Western powers to reach Afghanistan in terms of aid, in terms of other things apart from Pakistan? Do you think this could also be a route, sir?
Now, an alternate route for whom? That is the important part. As far as I can see, at the present state, I don't think the level of relations or the level of trust between Iran and the West is anywhere near a point where it can it can even think or conceive of such an. It is, if anything, looking at the possibilities of working despite the obvious Shia-Sunni divide, there is an important, they have important equities mainly because there is the Farsi-speaking people, there are the Shia communities in Iraq, in Afghanistan, whose interests they have always been careful to support and have been keeping in mind. And there is the larger question of the relations, the links between Iran and Afghanistan, which they will like to promote. And of course, China is also thinking in terms of building the kind of connectivity through Afghanistan into West Asia through Iran. So that is one thing. For us, on the other hand, I think there will be prospects for us to be able to build alternate routes to Afghanistan via Iran. And I think they will be cautiously positive, I feel, in trying to work to develop some of the earlier infrastructure projects which we are thinking of, if for nothing, at least as an alternative. They will be thinking in terms of alternate routes from Central Asia, because I think even though Central Asia has been talking through Afghanistan and Pakistan and China for building connectivity through Afghanistan and Pakistan, I think the alternate route for reaching the Gulf of Hormuz through Iran is also there. And I think Iran would be interested in following this, because if it also helps them to build some of their constituencies in the Herat region, as well as in the center of Afghanistan. I think that is an alternative which Iran will always follow.
Sir, Ali Wazir, member of the National Assembly of Pakistan, very recently on the floor of the National Assembly, he belongs to the tribal area, sir. And Ali Wazir said that in Pakistani airstrikes, and this was on the floor of the National Assembly, the parliament, sir, he said that more than 40 people, innocent people, were killed in Pakistani Air Force strikes inside Afghanistan. Now, this number can be debated, sir, because the Pakistani media said 6 and he's saying 40. That aside, sir, how do you think this is going to impact the relationship between the Taliban and the Pakistanis? Because this is a military strike inside Afghanistan, sir.
Yeah, well, this is something which the Taliban would look at very carefully, but I don't think they would either side will allow this to get out of hand. They will seek to try and control it, but there is clearly a major problem that is brewing between them. And that is partly because it was something which could not have been, I don't think people could have been oblivious to this possibility, mainly because I think the Taliban have, at the best of times, they are not controllable. And while it is true that among the several factions itself, there is a dominant faction and they have control now in crucial ministries in Kabul, that is not to suggest that they have the ability to control the situation on the ground. And it is those kind of differences which are causing the kind of problems which Pakistan has had to face with, and decided that it would face with it through a very, very robust attack. And I think this is the kind of thing which they have to say, because I think in this kind of a situation, in the border areas, unless you take strong muscular action, no lesson is learned. And I think that is probably, I don't think that this is going to result in a major let's say, fissure. They will work out their way to sort out this problem between themselves. I'm sure of that. At least in the media, they will not allow it to result in any kind of major breach. And I think eventually wiser counsel will come, and they will probably work out to settle the problem through discussion.
So my last question to you, sir, is you mentioned very interestingly Pashtun nationalism, sir. Now we have Manzoor Pashtun, sir, who is the young leader, sir. He's in his late 20s, if at all, sir. And Manzoor Pashtun has been leading a non-violent struggle against Pakistani security forces' excesses within the framework of the Pakistani constitution, sir. And there are many people who support him, both sides of the border. Now, a peaceful struggle, as far as Afghans are concerned, is is paradoxical, to say the least, because Afghans are not known, unless of course you're talking about Frontier Gandhi, who was in the same league. Yes, sir, in the same league. Otherwise, generally they are known to be people who are emotional, who take up weapons. Now, how dangerous, if I may use that word, sir, how dangerous is Pashtun nationalism to the Pakistan security state, sir? Because these people have relatives across. How dangerous is it for Pakistan, sir?
I think it is a major problem for them. The fact is how they address the problem. And I think if they were to address the problem by negativity, I think they'd have to work out some kind of a willingness to take the issue as part of the normal bilateral discussions between the two countries. If they were to do that, they may be able to draw down a little bit on the emotions. I think this is a very, very emotional factor in the case of Pathans, particularly the question of the Pashtun nationalism, and the fact that there is support even for a peaceful kind of movement shows that they are willing to push the movement to keep the sensitivities alive, to keep to build a kind of commonality in terms of how this should be addressed, to see if it can be addressed without violence. But if this is not addressed, and if the Pakistani state is to actually show that they are not going to be sensitive to any discussion of this problem, that will cause problems. And that is exactly as happened in the case of Baluchi nationalism too.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, with Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, he told us a lot about what's happening in Afghanistan, the China factor, Pakistan. We spoke about Iran and also Pashtun nationalism. On behalf of all our viewers, sir, we thank you, and we'll be back again next week with another special guest on another special topic. Don't forget, viewers, to like, subscribe and press the bell icon, and do encourage us. Jai Hind.